if you don't listen to me, we're getting a divorce. I can't stay married to someone who says such selfish things. I accept the divorce, even though my husband is acting smart and doesn't know what's coming next. My name is Emily. I've been married for 5 years, and I'm 35. It's just me and my husband. We've wanted children but haven't been able to have any yet. We thought about fertility treatments, but my husband didn't want to go through with it, so we left it to chance. If we don't have kids, it will just be us. After we got married, both of my husband's parents passed away, and we didn't have time for treatments. My husband is quite controlling. At work, he was a senior and often called me his foolish wife in front of others. He scolded me harshly if I made a mistake. This behavior didn't change after we got married. Though he seems like a bad person, he does have a gentle side. He gave me good advice when I was his subordinate and helped me when I was feeling down after my grandfather died. That support led us to start dating and eventually marry. Since getting married, I've stopped working and become a full-time housewife. My husband usually comes home after 9 p.m. because of his job. When he gets home, I greet him and help with his clothes, but he doesn't say much. I prepare dinner, and he eats quietly. After dinner, he goes to the bathroom, and I get his towel and underwear ready. He then heads straight to bed. He's always been quiet, and recently, his new job promotion seems to have made him even more tired. We don't talk much anymore, but I still trust and love him. He was there for me when I had a tough time. I lost my father in middle school and my mother when I was in my first year of high school. After that, my grandfather took me in and raised me with a lot of love. I wanted to show my appreciation by saving money from my job, taking him on trips, and sharing good times with him. I enjoyed spending time with my grandfather. I wished he could stay healthy forever. But 3 years after I started working, my grandfather passed away from lung cancer. I was left completely alone. I knew I'd have to say goodbye eventually, but I didn't expect it to be so soon. I regretted not being able to do more for him or spend more time together. I was very sad and cried every night. My then boss, who is now my husband, noticed my sadness. He was kind and listened to me, telling me I had been through a lot and did well. I felt lucky to have him as a boss. Normally strict and intimidating, he was gentle and supportive during that tough time. I know he's a kind person deep down, which is why I wanted to stay with him. One afternoon, the home phone rang. It was my husband's younger brother, who I hadn't heard from in a while. He asked to speak to my husband. I told my husband about the call, and he answered the phone with a smile. His younger brother, 15 years younger than him, is someone my husband really cares about. He's been living happily with his wife for 2 years. But when my husband's tone suddenly became serious, I knew something was wrong. After hanging up, he told me that his brother had been laid off from his job. I was shocked, as I hadn't expected this at all. My brother-in-law is very different from my husband. He's kind, calm, and respectful. He always defends me when my husband is rude and apologizes for his behavior. I have a good impression of him and his wife. I wanted to help them in any way I could. I asked my husband if there was something I could do, but he gave me a sharp look and asked what I meant by something. I suggested to my husband that we should do something to help his brother feel better. He sighed heavily and said that I wouldn't understand because I haven't been part of the working world. He told me that it wasn't my place to suggest anything, and his harsh response surprised me. I meant well, but it seemed I had upset him. I asked him if I wasn't part of the family too, but he said I was just his wife, not his brother's family. His words hurt deeply. I had never seen him act so aggressively before. His brother being laid off must have been a huge shock for him, but his harshness was unexpected. He told me not to do anything unnecessary and walked out. After that, he became even more demanding and critical of me. He complained about the meals I prepared and compared me unfavorably to his brother's wife. His unreasonable behavior was confusing, and I didn't know what had changed. One day, my husband began sorting through things and filling garbage bags. I was puzzled but didn't interface because our relationship had become so strained that I didn't have the energy to talk to him. Then he told me that we needed to start packing because we were moving out. He said he was giving the house to his brother and his wife. I was shocked and confused by his decision. My husband suddenly decided to give our house to his unemployed brother and his wife. I asked why he was doing this out of the blue, and he shouted at me to be quiet. I pointed out that giving away the house didn't solve our living situation. He insisted that, as his brother was in trouble, he needed to help him, and we would figure out where to live later. I was confused and suspicious. My brother-in-law wouldn't just take our house without question. As I was about to confront my husband, he handed me divorce papers and told me that if I was only going to argue, I was of no use to him. He demanded I leave immediately. I was shocked by his sudden decision, but felt it might be for the best. I picked up the divorce papers and signed them. My husband watched me with a smug smile, which almost made me laugh at how absurd he looked. After signing, I reminded him that the house wasn't his to give away. It was my house, inherited from my grandfather. My husband was stunned. I explained that he had moved into my house before we were married because he didn't want to pay rent, and I've been paying the property taxes ever since. He had never contributed anything. My husband seemed flustered and said it didn't matter since we would soon be divorced. I told him that his behavior was unbelievable and selfish, and we needed to calm down. I let all my frustrations out on my husband. I loved him and thought he loved me too, but maybe I was wrong. I never expected our marriage to end so quickly. Emily, wait, this is a misunderstanding. Let's talk, he said. Talk about what? You were the one who wanted a divorce, I replied. I carefully put away the filled-out divorce papers, planning to submit them first thing tomorrow morning. My husband lay on the floor, dazed, and muttered, "No, this can't be happening." I told him coldly that this was my house and he needed to leave immediately. Once the papers were filed, we would be strangers. I felt no sympathy for him. Even when he cried and clung to me, he eventually left, resigned to his fate. The news of our divorce spread quickly at his work, and he was immediately looked down upon. Rumors about our divorce and his behavior during our marriage circulated widely. It seemed he had lost his standing at his company. I wondered who spread those rumors, but all I did was answer questions from his colleagues and subordinates. About 6 months after the divorce, I ran into someone I hoped not to see while leaving a real estate agency. My ex-husband. It seemed he had been waiting for me outside the agency. The situation was unsettling, and even when I tried to ignore him, he followed me persistently. Frustrated, I agreed to talk. Enough. If you have something to say, just say it, I told him. Emily, I've always despised you, he said. His sudden claim left me confused. He said he had been blaming me for his brother's job loss. Why would it be my fault? I asked. Since we got married, he said only bad things happened, like his parents dying and his injury. But his father was already sick before we married, and his mother was frail. His injury was due to his own clumsiness when he got drunk and fell. Despite this, he believed I was responsible for all his misfortunes. So you think I'm the cause of all your problems and that's why you hated me? I said. I always thought you were just awkward, but you actually despised me. I was frustrated with his refusal to take responsibility and his constant blaming of others. I couldn't believe someone like him could be a supervisor. I worried about his subordinates who might be unfairly criticized. He continued to tell me about his misfortunes even after our divorce. He showed me burns from a recent fire that destroyed his apartment, and he mentioned losing his wallet, making mistakes at work, and his brother's coldness towards him. Honestly, I don't feel sorry for you, I said. These are the results of your own actions. I have nothing to do with them. Please, Emily, come back to me, he begged. We've been together for so long. I took care of things when you were working and helped you when your grandfather died. Looking at him, trying to guilt-trip me, made me shiver. All your problems come from your own actions. Maybe you should look at yourself and stop blaming others. With that, I walked away, ignoring his desperate calls. My ex-husband was calling out to me, trying to get my attention, but I ignored him and blended into the crowd. About a week after our divorce, I got a call from my former brother-in-law. "Emily, well, you're not my sister-in-law anymore," he said. "I'm sorry, but I wanted to talk about my brother." He explained that the decision to give the house to his brother was made by my ex-husband alone. His wife and he had no idea about it. My former brother-in-law said he and his wife felt sorry for how my ex-husband treated me, and he thought it was good that we divorced. He wished me happiness. I thanked him, and he told me he found a job and was managing to get by. I was happy for him. He mentioned he planned to distance himself from his brother, which is why my ex-husband couldn't reach him. And now, my ex-husband, who had lost his wife and was estranged from his younger brother, was truly alone. I hoped he would understand the consequences of his mistakes, but for now, I needed to completely cut him out of my life. On the day I ran into my ex-husband, I had just signed a contract to rent out the house I inherited from my grandfather. It was too big for me, but I couldn't let go of the house full of memories. I preferred to have someone who wanted to live there. I decided to change my phone number, move, and completely sever ties with my ex-husband. At 35, I still have a long life ahead of me.
The news of my father's sudden demise hit me like a tidal wave, leaving me gasping for air in a sea of emotions. Richard Cunningham, a wealthy businessman, had always been my anchor, my guiding light in a world that seemed dark and uncertain. But now, with his departure, I found myself adrift, struggling to make sense of the void he left behind. I stood alone in his opulent study, surrounded by shelves lined with leather-bound books and elegant artifacts from his travels. The room, once filled with his commanding presence, now seemed hauntingly empty. The weight of his absence settled heavily upon my shoulders, threatening to crush me under its unbearable burden. Days turned into nights as I wandered through the hallways of our grand estate, feeling the weight of grief pressing against my chest with each step. My mind became a whirlwind of memories, laughter shared over family dinners, warm hugs, and fatherly advice that had shaped me into the person I had become. One evening, as I sat by the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon, a hesitant knock echoed through the silence. Startled, I turned to see a tall, dark-haired man standing at the doorway. It took me a moment to recognize him. Lucas, my stepbrother. "Katie," he spoke softly, his voice carrying a mix of sorrow and apprehension. "I heard about our father. I'm so sorry for your loss." Bitterness swirled within me as I faced the man who had been absent from our lives for over a decade and a half. "Where were you all these years, Lucas?" I asked, my voice tinged with anger. "While I stood by our father's side, you vanished into thin air." Lucas lowered his gaze, a flicker of remorse crossing his face. "I made mistakes, Katie. I know I can't change the past, but I want to be here for you now. Our father's passing has made me realize how much I've missed out on." Tears welled up in my eyes, mingling with the bitterness in my heart. "It's too late, Lucas. You can't waltz back into our lives, expecting everything to be as it once was. You abandoned us, and now you're here to claim what's left." His expression softened, and he took a hesitant step forward. "I never wanted to take anything from you, Katie. I just want a chance to make amends, to be a part of your life again." Anger and sadness collided within me, creating a storm that threatened to consume me. "There's nothing left to salvage, Lucas. Our father's gone, and you can't change the past. I suggest you leave before I say something I might regret." Lucas nodded, a hint of sorrow etched into his features. "I understand, but know that I'm here if you ever change your mind. We're family, Katie, whether you want to believe it or not." With those words hanging in the air, Lucas turned and walked away, leaving me to grapple with the whirlwind of emotions that threatened to tear me apart. As the door closed behind him, I felt a profound sense of loss. A loss not only of my father, but also of the possibility of reconciliation with the brother I had once cherished. In the midst of my grief, a name from the past resurfaced like a phantom haunting my thoughts. It had been over 15 years since I last saw him. Lucas, my stepbrother. We had grown up together, bound by the threads of a complicated family dynamic. Yet, as we drifted apart, our paths diverged, and our lives took different turns. Days turned into weeks, and the heaviness of my father's absence lingered. I found solace in the memories we had shared, but the ache in my heart remained. I immersed myself in the practicalities of handling his estate, hoping to find some semblance of closure amidst the chaos. One afternoon, as I sat at my father's desk, sorting through stacks of paperwork, the sound of the doorbell pierced through the silence of the mansion. My heart skipped a beat, uncertainty coursing through my veins. Who could it be? I made my way to the grand entrance, hesitantly opening the door. There, standing before me, was a figure I had once known so well. Lucas. His presence was a jarring reminder of a past I had tried to bury. "Katie," he greeted, his voice filled with a mix of awkwardness and longing. I studied him intently, noting the changes time had etched upon his face. His once boyish features had given way to a more weathered countenance, lines of experience and regret carving their way across his brow. "It has indeed been a long time," I replied, my voice tinged with a mixture of caution and curiosity. "What brings you here, Lucas? After all these years?" Lucas shifted uncomfortably, his eyes evading mine. "I heard about Richard's passing, and I wanted to pay my respects. I know we haven't been close, but he was still my father, too." I crossed my arms, a surge of bitterness washing over me. "Funny how you never seemed to care before. You vanished from our lives, leaving me to shoulder the weight of our father's expectations alone." His gaze finally met mine, filled with a hint of remorse. "Katie, I made mistakes. I was young, lost. I didn't know how to handle it all, but I want to make amends, to be a part of your life again." Anger simmered within me, threatening to boil over. "You think you can just waltz back in here and claim what's left of our father's legacy? After everything you've put us through?" Lucas took a step forward, his voice pleading. "No, Katie, that's not why I'm here. I've realized the emptiness of chasing wealth and power. I want to rebuild our relationship, to find forgiveness and healing together." I stared at him, torn between the pain of the past and the flicker of hope his words ignited. "It's not that simple, Lucas. The wounds run deep, and time doesn't erase the scars." He reached out, his hand hovering in the space between us. "I understand that, but let me try, Katie. Let me prove that I've changed, that I'm not the person I once was." A mixture of vulnerability and defiance warred within me, but a small part of me longed for reconciliation. Perhaps, amidst the chaos of grief and loss, there was room for healing, for a renewed bond. "Fine," I relented, uncertainty coloring my voice. "But know this, Lucas, if you disappoint me again, there won't be another chance." Lucas nodded, determination flickering in his eyes. "I won't let you down, Katie. Together, we can find our way back to family." As I watched him enter the threshold of our childhood home, a glimmer of hope mingled with the remnants of bitterness. The journey ahead would not be easy, but maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for us to rebuild what had once been shattered. The tension between Lucas and me simmered beneath the surface, like a volcano ready to erupt. We agreed to meet one day, hoping to resolve our differences, but as we sat face to face in a quiet cafe, the atmosphere crackled with animosity. The scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, a futile attempt to mask the bitter taste of resentment that lingered between us. Lucas leaned back in his chair, his eyes fixed on mine with a mixture of defiance and determination. "You have no right to take everything away from me," Lucas spat, his voice laced with anger. I deserve my share, just like you. Fury coursed through my veins as I fought to maintain composure, my fingers curling tightly around the coffee cup. Deserve? You abandoned our family, Lucas? You disappeared without a trace, leaving me alone with our father? Now you dare to come back and claim what is rightfully mine? Lucas's nostrils flared, his voice growing louder. I had my reasons, Katie. You don't know what I went through during those years. Life was not kind to me, and I had to fight my own battles. I leaned forward, my voice a sharp retort. And what about me? Did you ever think about the battles I fought alone? The void you left behind when you disappeared? I stood by our father's side, supporting him in his final years, while you were nowhere to be found? Lucas's eyes narrowed, his voice dripping with resentment. You always had it easy, Katie. Father favored you, showering you with attention and gifts. I had to fight for every scrap of recognition. I shook my head, my voice filled with sorrow. You're wrong, Lucas. Our father loved us both, but you were blinded by your own bitterness. You chose to walk away, leaving behind the family that loved you. A hush fell upon our table as the weight of our words hung in the air. The glimmer of hope for reconciliation seemed to fade, replaced by the stark reality of the chasm between us. We were both wounded souls, scarred by the past, but unable to find common ground. I don't expect you to understand, Lucas muttered, his voice tinged with resignation. But I can't let this go. I need my share, Katie. I took a deep breath, my gaze never wavering. This isn't just about money, Lucas. It's about the legacy our father left behind, the values, the memories, the love, and you can't lay claim to that after all these years. Lucas's face hardened, his fists clenching with pent-up frustration. We'll see about that. I'll fight for what's rightfully mine, no matter what it takes. With a heavy sigh, I realized that our conversation had reached an impasse. The wounds of the past were too deep, the divide between us too wide. The only way forward seemed to be through the legal system, a battle that would determine the fate of our father's estate and, in many ways, our own futures. As we left the cafe, the bitterness in the air hung heavy around us. Our paths had diverged once again, and it seemed that the journey toward reconciliation was slipping further from our grasp. The wheels of justice turned slowly, but they ground relentlessly. Days turned into weeks, and as the court date loomed closer, the tension between Lucas and me reached its peak. Our once fragile bond shattered completely, replaced by a fierce determination to claim what we believed was rightfully ours. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as the judge entered, his stern gaze fixed upon both of us. The room was filled with lawyers, witnesses, and curious onlookers, all waiting for the truth to unravel. Lucas stood tall, his demeanor defiant as he locked eyes with me. It was a gaze filled with accusation and determination, a silent challenge to my resolve. I, too, stood my ground, determined to protect my father's legacy and seek justice for the pain he had inflicted upon me. The proceedings began with lawyers presenting their arguments and witnesses testifying to the nature of our relationship with our late father. It was a painful process, as wounds were reopened and emotions ran high. Then came the moment of truth, the judge's verdict. As the words left his lips, the weight of the decision settled upon my shoulders like a heavy burden. The entirety of my father's fortune was to be mine, while Lucas would face consequences for his violent act against me. I couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and sorrow. The victory was bittersweet, as it confirmed the irreparable damage that had been done to our relationship. The judge's gavel echoed through the courtroom, marking the end of the trial and the beginning of a new chapter. Outside the courthouse, Lucas approached me, his face a mask of resentment and anger. "You won this battle, Katie," he hissed through gritted teeth. "But don't think for a moment that this is over. I squared my shoulders, refusing to back down. You brought this upon yourself, Lucas. You chose violence, betrayal, and now you have to face the consequences. His eyes flashed with a mix of defiance and desperation. I'll never forgive you for this, Katie. You've taken everything from me. A pang of sadness pierced my heart, but I held my ground. You had a chance to mend our relationship, to find redemption, but you chose a path of greed and entitlement. This is the result of your own actions. With a final glare, Lucas turned away, disappearing into the crowd. It was a bitter farewell, a reminder of the shattered bond that once held us together. But as I walked away, a sense of closure washed over me. The court had spoken, and justice had been served. In the following months, I devoted myself to rebuilding my life, to moving forward from the pain and betrayal that had consumed me. The scars of the past would always remain, but I refused to let them define my future. As time passed, the wounds slowly healed and a newfound strength blossomed within me. I realized that true wealth was not measured in material possessions, but in the resilience of the human spirit. The path to forgiveness remained uncertain, but I held on to hope. Perhaps one day, Lucas would find his own path to redemption, and our fractured bond could be healed. Until then, I would continue to cherish the memory of my father and strive to live a life that honored his legacy, a life filled with compassion, strength, and the pursuit of true happiness. The echoes of the courtroom drama still reverberated in my mind as the final chapter of this tumultuous journey unfolded. The judge's ruling had determined the fate of my late father's estate, and it was time for justice to be served. The courtroom was filled with anticipation once again. As Lucas stood before the judge, his face a mask of defiance mixed with resignation. The weight of his actions hung heavily upon him, and the consequences of his violence were about to be realized. The judge, a figure of authority and impartiality, addressed Lucas sternly. Mr. Lucas Henderson, you have been found guilty of assaulting Ms. Katie Ross and causing her physical harm. Such behavior is inexcusable and warrants appropriate punishment. Lucas shifted uncomfortably, his eyes avoiding mine. Your Honor, I understand the severity of my actions and the pain I've caused. I deeply regret my behavior and the consequences it has brought upon me and my family. The judge nodded, his gaze unwavering. Regret is an important first step, Mr. Henderson. However, it does not absolve you of your responsibility. The court must uphold the principles of justice and ensure that such acts are appropriately penalized. As the judge pronounced the sentence, the weight of the courtroom seemed to grow heavier. Lucas would face the consequences of his violent act, while I would finally receive the justice I sought. Mr. Lucas Henderson, the judge declared, you will serve 3 months in a correctional facility for the assault against Ms. Katie Ross. This sentence is meant to provide an opportunity for reflection and rehabilitation. Lucas's eyes widened, a mix of shock and resignation flooding his face. Your Honor, I accept the sentence. I will use this time to reflect upon my actions and work towards becoming a better person. The courtroom fell into a heavy silence as the realization of the judgment settled upon us. The verdict was both a victory and a solemn reminder of the broken bond between us. I couldn't help but feel a mixture of relief and sadness as I witnessed the consequences of our shared history. Outside the courtroom, Lucas approached me, his face etched with a blend of remorse and acceptance. Katie, I never meant for things to escalate this far. I'm truly sorry for what I've done. I looked at him, my eyes softening with a glimmer of compassion. Lucas, it's too late for apologies now. The damage has been done, but perhaps during your time in the correctional facility, you can find the opportunity for self-reflection and growth. He nodded, his voice filled with a newfound humility. I will do my best, Katie. I know I have a long way to go, but I want to change. I want to make amends for the pain I've caused. A hint of hope flickered within me, a cautious belief that redemption was possible, even in the darkest of circumstances. Lucas, true change takes time and consistent effort. If you are sincere in your desire for transformation, then prove it through your actions, not just words. He reached out, his hand hovering in the space between us. Thank you, Katie, for giving me this chance. I promise I won't let you down. I hesitated for a moment, then extended my hand, offering a gesture of reconciliation. Make the most of this opportunity, Lucas. Find a way to heal and grow, not just for yourself, but for our shared past as well. As our hands briefly touched, a sense of closure washed over me. The journey had been long and arduous, but justice had been served. Now, it was time for healing, forgiveness, and the possibility of a brighter future.
It all started the moment I walked into my husband's family home. My name is Sarah, and I fell in love with Mark despite knowing that his mother, Mrs. Elizabeth Thompson, had never approved of any woman her son brought home. Little did I know, I was about to embark on a tumultuous journey filled with heartache and betrayal. The Thompson family residence was a grand, imposing mansion that exuded an air of opulence. As I approached the front door, nerves fluttered in my stomach. I clutched the bouquet of flowers tightly, hoping it would serve as a peace offering to Mrs. Thompson. Upon entering, I was greeted by a magnificent foyer adorned with exquisite artwork and elegant furniture. Mark's mother stood at the top of the grand staircase, her icy blue eyes fixated on me. Her disapproving gaze cast a shadow over me from the very beginning, and I could feel the weight of her judgment. "Welcome, Sarah," she said, her voice dripping with false warmth. "I hope you find our home to your liking." "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson," I replied, trying to mask my apprehension with a smile. "It's a beautiful house." "Oh, it's more than just a house, my dear," she said, her tone laced with condescension. "It's a symbol of our family's heritage, a legacy that must be upheld." I nodded politely, desperately trying to make a good impression despite the obvious tension in the air. Mark appeared beside me, his arms sliding around my waist, a feeble attempt to show his support. "Mom, Sarah, and I are really happy together," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "I hope you can give her a chance." Mrs. Thompson's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a disdainful smirk. "Mark, my dear, love is not enough to sustain a successful marriage. It takes more than mere infatuation to become a worthy member of this family." I could feel Mark's grip on my waist tighten, a silent indication of his inner conflict. But I refused to let Mrs. Thompson's words deter me. I had already fallen in love with Mark, and I was determined to prove myself worthy of his love and the Thompson family's acceptance. Little did I know that Mrs. Thompson's disapproval would manifest itself in countless ways, her actions slowly chipping away at my self-esteem. Her constant comparisons veiled insults, and passive-aggressive remarks created a toxic atmosphere that made me question my place in Mark's life. But I was not one to easily give up. I loved Mark with all my heart, and I believed that love had the power to conquer all obstacles. However, as time went on, I couldn't help but wonder if I would ever be able to bridge the gap between Mrs. Thompson's expectations and the woman I truly was. Little did I know that the coming New Year's dinner would become the breaking point, the catalyst for a series of events that would change my life forever. As the new year approached, Mrs. Thompson decided to organize a grand dinner for the entire family. It was supposed to be a joyous occasion, a chance for everyone to put their differences aside and enjoy each other's company. However, I knew deep down that tensions would only escalate. The dining room was a sight to behold, adorned with fine china, crystal glasses, and an extravagant centerpiece. The air crackled with anticipation as family members began to fill the seats around the long, polished table. Mark and I took our places, my heart pounding with a mixture of hope and anxiety. Mrs. Thompson sat at the head of the table, her presence commanding and formidable. Her gaze swept over the room, her eyes lingering on me with a mix of disdain and skepticism. I tried my best to maintain a calm composure, determined not to let her get to me. The dinner started with polite conversation, each family member sharing updates on their lives. However, it didn't take long for the facade of civility to crumble. A seemingly innocent remark about differing political views sparked a heated debate between two family members. The tension in the room thickened with each passing word. Mrs. Thompson, always the instigator, seized the opportunity to steer the conversation towards me. And Sarah, have you ever considered that perhaps your opinions lack the depth and wisdom that comes with age and experience? I took a deep breath, feeling my cheeks flush with a mixture of anger and humiliation. Mrs. Thompson, I believe everyone's opinions should be respected, regardless of age or experience. We can learn from one another if we're open to it. Mark, sensing the mounting tension, attempted to diffuse the situation. Mom, can we please focus on enjoying the evening? Let's not turn this into an argument. But Mrs. Thompson was relentless, her eyes narrowing with contempt. Mark, it's clear to me that Sarah lacks the maturity to handle intellectual discussions. Maybe you should have chosen a woman who understands the importance of tradition and decorum. The room fell silent, the weight of Mrs. Thompson's words hanging in the air. I felt a surge of anger rise within me, fueling a courage I had never known before. I couldn't let her belittle me any longer. Standing up from my seat, I looked Mrs. Thompson in the eye, my voice steady and firm. I may not fit into your narrow definition of what a wife should be, Mrs. Thompson, but I refuse to be silenced or diminished. I am proud of who I am and the values I hold. If that is not enough for you, then perhaps it's time for me to reconsider my place in this family. Gasps echoed through the room as I turned and walked out, leaving behind a stunned and speechless family. As I made my way to the front door, a whirlwind of emotions washed over me. Anger, sadness, and a newfound determination. Little did I know that my decision to leave that evening would mark the beginning of a journey towards reclaiming my self-worth and seeking the justice I so desperately deserve. In that moment, I felt something inside me snap. I had endured years of mistreatment, always hoping that things would get better. But now I realized that I couldn't continue living in a toxic environment where my worth was constantly questioned. With tears streaming down my face, I calmly replied, "All right." Without a second thought, I left the dinner table, leaving behind a stunned and silent family. As I walked out the door, a determination filled my heart. I would no longer allow myself to be treated as less than I deserved. Days turned into weeks, and the weight of my decision began to settle upon me. The absence of Mark's support, his unwillingness to stand up to his mother, only reinforced my conviction that I had made the right choice. It was time to reclaim my sense of self and build a life that honored my worth. One evening, as I sat in my new apartment surrounded by unpacked boxes, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was Mark, his voice tinged with regret and uncertainty. "Sarah, please. I didn't realize how much I relied on you until you left," he pleaded. "I can't bear the thought of losing you. Can we talk?" My heart wavered, memories of our love and the dreams we had shared flooding back. But I knew that going back to the way things were would only perpetuate the cycle of toxicity. I needed to stand my ground. "Mark, I love you, but love cannot thrive in an environment poisoned by your mother's disdain," I said, my voice firm yet filled with sadness. "If you truly want us to have a future together, we need to address the issues at hand." There was a heavy silence on the other end of the line, punctuated only by the sound of Mark's troubled breathing. Finally he spoke, his voice laced with a mix of frustration and resignation. "I don't know if things can change, Sarah," he confessed. "She's always been like this, and I don't know if she'll ever see reason." I took a deep breath, finding strength in my resolve. "Then, Mark, maybe it's time for us to find our own happiness apart. I refuse to spend my life begging for acceptance from someone who will never truly see me." As the words left my mouth, a sense of liberation washed over me. I was no longer defined by the chains of an unhealthy relationship. I was taking control of my own destiny, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. With each passing day, my determination grew stronger. I immersed myself in self-reflection and self-care, seeking healing from the wounds inflicted by Mrs. Thompson and the pain of a love that couldn't conquer all. I realized that true happiness could only be found by embracing my own worth, free from the toxic influence that had overshadowed my life for far too long. Little did I know that this breaking point would mark the beginning of a transformative journey. one that would lead me towards an unexpected path of revenge, where I would find the strength to fight for justice and emerge stronger than ever before. Days turned into weeks, and the anger inside me transformed into a steely resolve. I decided to fight back, not just for myself, but for every moment I had been belittled and disrespected. I filed a lawsuit against my own family, seeking justice and retribution for the years of emotional abuse I had endured. As I sat in the lawyer's office, poring over the details of the case, a fire burned within me. It was no longer just about seeking financial compensation. It was about exposing the truth, unearthing the darkness that lurked beneath the facade of a picture-perfect family. My lawyer, Mr. Anderson, looked at me with a mix of concern and determination. "Sarah, this won't be an easy battle. They have power, influence, and a network of loyal allies. But if you're willing to push forward, I'll be by your side every step of the way." I nodded, my voice filled with determination. "I'm ready, Mr. Anderson. I won't let them silence me any longer. It's time to shed light on the years of emotional abuse I endured at their hands." The legal proceedings were grueling, but I stood my ground, armed with evidence and a fire in my heart. Witness testimonies painted a damning picture of Mrs. Thompson's manipulation and control, highlighting the toxic environment she had created within the family. Amidst the courtroom battles, the divorce followed suit. It was a painful decision, but I knew that my marriage had become a mere extension of Mrs. Thompson's control over my life. With each step forward, I took control of my own destiny, refusing to let anyone hold power over me. One evening, as I sat in my lawyer's office, going over the latest developments in the case, a sense of satisfaction washed over me. The evidence was mounting, and the truth was being exposed for all to see. It was time to take a bold step towards retribution. "Mr. Anderson, I have an idea," I said, my voice filled with a mix of determination and a touch of mischief. "I want to go after their fortune. I want to hit them where it hurts the most." Mr. Anderson raised an eyebrow, intrigued by my proposition. "Sarah, going after their fortune will be an uphill battle. We need to ensure we have a strong case, a solid legal foundation to support our claims." I smiled, a glimmer of satisfaction in my eyes. "Don't worry, Mr. Anderson. I have gathered every piece of evidence, every financial discrepancy, every hidden account. They won't know what hit them." And so my revenge plan took shape. With meticulous preparation and an unyielding determination, we built a case that exposed the Thompson family's financial misdeeds. It was a journey filled with late nights, countless meetings, and the unwavering support of my legal team. The courtroom became the stage where my struggle for justice reached its climax. The judge saw through the facade of a loving family and recognized the deep scars I carried within me. As the gavel fell, my victory was pronounced. I was awarded half of the fortune that I had once believed was out of my reach. But the judge's final blow hit Mrs. Thompson the hardest. With a stern voice, the judge addressed her. "In addition to the financial compensation, Mrs. Thompson, you are hereby ordered to pay a $50,000 fine for the moral damages you have inflicted upon the plaintiff." I could see the shock and disbelief on Mrs. Thompson's face as the weight of her actions finally caught up with her. It was a moment of sweet satisfaction, knowing that justice had been served and that I had successfully turned the tables on the woman who had tormented me for so long. As I left the courtroom that day, a sense of closure washed over me. Revenge had been achieved, but more importantly, I had regained my dignity and self-worth. The journey was far from easy, but it had transformed me into a woman who would never again allow herself to be silenced or diminished. Little did I know that this was only the beginning of a new chapter in my life, one where I would rise above pain and bitterness, embracing a future filled with resilience, self-love, and the freedom to be unapologetically myself. The courtroom victory had been a turning point in my life. With the weight of Mrs. Thompson's abuses lifted from my shoulders, I could finally breathe freely. I had achieved the revenge I sought, but more importantly, I had found the strength to reclaim my identity and rebuild my life on my own terms. In the aftermath of the legal battle, the news of the court's decision spread like wildfire. The Thompson family's once immaculate reputation was tarnished, their dark secrets brought into the glaring light of truth. People started questioning the image they had projected for so long, and the whispers of their deceit echoed through social circles. One afternoon, as I sat in a cafe, Sipping my coffee, a familiar voice broke through the surrounding chatter. It was Mark, standing just a few feet away, his gaze locked on mine. His eyes held a mixture of regret, longing, and a touch of humility. "Sarah, can we please talk?" he pleaded, his voice filled with genuine remorse. I studied him for a moment, contemplating the years of pain he had caused me. But I saw a glimmer of change in his eyes, a spark of introspection that made me pause. Reluctantly, I motioned for him to join me. As he sat across from me, the air between us heavy with unspoken words, I broke the silence. "Mark, I never wanted things to end this way," I began, my voice laced with a tinge of sadness. "But the toxicity in our relationship and your loyalty to your mother made it impossible for me to stay." He lowered his gaze, his hands fidgeting nervously. "I know, Sarah. I allowed her control over our lives, and I deeply regret the pain I caused you. I've come to realize that my mother's approval should never have been a prerequisite for our happiness." I sighed, the memories of our love and the dreams we once shared flooding back. "Mark, it's too late for us. We've both grown and changed in ways that cannot be reconciled. I need to move forward, and I hope you find the strength to do the same." Tears welled up in his eyes, and he reached across the table, grasping my hand. "Sarah, please believe me when I say that I am truly sorry for everything. I hope you find the happiness and peace you deserve." As I looked into his eyes, I could see the sincerity in his words. A pang of bittersweet nostalgia washed over me, but I knew that closure was necessary for us to heal and move forward separately. With a gentle squeeze of his hand, I nodded. "Thank you, Mark. I appreciate your apology, and I wish you all the best." And with that, we parted ways, our paths diverging once and for all. It was a moment of closure, a final chapter in the story of a relationship that had been marred by the shadow of Mrs. Thompson's influence. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. The financial compensation I had received allowed me to start anew, pursuing my passions and embracing the freedom I had longed for. I surrounded myself with friends who uplifted me, seeking solace in their unwavering support. But the true triumph came from within as I found the strength to forgive, not for the sake of those who had wronged me, but for my own peace of mind. I let go of the bitterness that had consumed me and embraced a future filled with self-love and personal growth. As time passed, the wounds began to heal, leaving behind scars that served as a reminder of my resilience. I emerged from the darkness stronger, wiser, and ready to face whatever challenges life had in store. The journey was not without its difficulties, but I discovered that true triumph lies not in seeking revenge, but in finding the courage to rise above the pain and create a life filled with happiness and authenticity. And so, with my head held high and a heart filled with newfound strength, I stepped into the next chapter of my life. A chapter defined by triumph closure and the unwavering belief that I deserved nothing less than the happiness I had fought so fiercely to reclaim.
My name is Agnes, and for as long as I can remember, my life has revolved around my husband Tom. We were high school sweethearts, and our love blossomed into a fairy tale romance. We tied the knot in a quaint countryside wedding, promising to be there for each other through sickness and health. Little did I know that those vows would soon be put to the ultimate test. It all started on a chilly autumn morning when a persistent cough took hold of my lungs. Initially, I brushed it off as a common cold, but as the days turned into weeks, my condition worsened. Fatigue settled deep within my bones, and every breath became a struggle. Concerned, Tom insisted that I see a doctor. Reluctantly, I agreed, hoping that it would be nothing more than a passing ailment. We arrived at the hospital, the sterile environment accentuating my growing sense of unease. Tom held my hand tightly, his eyes filled with worry. After enduring a series of tests and examinations, the doctors couldn't pinpoint the exact cause of my illness. They speculated about various possibilities, from a stubborn respiratory infection to a more serious underlying condition. Each day, the weight of uncertainty hung heavy in the air, adding to my growing anxiety. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting shadows on the hospital walls, Tom sat by my bedside. His face was etched with concern, his voice trembling with genuine fear. "Agnes, I hate seeing you like this," he said softly, his hand gently caressing mine. "We'll get through this together. I promise." I mustered a weak smile, grateful for his support, but haunted by the unknown. The seed of doubt had been planted, for there was a subtle shift in Tom's demeanor that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Days turned into weeks, and the hospital became my temporary home. Tom visited faithfully, bringing small gestures of love and comfort. Yet, amidst his acts of care, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. One evening, as the doctors continued their search for a diagnosis, I mustered the courage to voice my fears. Tears welled up in my eyes, and my voice trembled as I asked the question that had been gnawing at my heart. "Tom, what if they can't find out what's wrong with me? What if this never ends?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He took a deep breath, his eyes darting away for a moment before meeting mine. "Agnes, we have to stay positive. They'll figure it out. We just need to be patient," he replied, his tone trying to mask a hint of hesitation. I clung to his words, desperate for hope. Yet a seed of doubt had taken root within me. As the days dragged on, my condition deteriorated further, and Tom's visits became less frequent. Each passing day heightened my suspicion that something was terribly wrong. Little did I know that the true test of our love and loyalty was yet to come. And when it did, my world would be shattered, revealing the darkest depths of betrayal. After a seemingly endless stay in the hospital, I finally received a diagnosis. The relief of knowing what ailed me was short-lived as the true nature of my husband's character came crashing down around me. The doctors had discovered a severe case of pneumonia, but that was not the worst of it. As I returned home, weak and exhausted, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach. Something was off, and I couldn't shake the unsettling absence of our savings, which we had diligently stashed away in the safe. With trembling hands, I approached the safe, my heart pounding in anticipation. But as I turned the dial and swung open the heavy metal door, my worst fears were realized. It was empty. Every last penny we had saved had vanished without a trace. Panic gripped my heart as I sank to the floor, a wave of betrayal washing over me. Tom had deceived me, along with his conniving parents. The weight of their treachery felt like a crushing blow to my already weakened body. Unable to contain my anguish any longer, I confronted Tom, desperation and anger fueling my voice. "How could you, Tom? How could you steal our money, the money we worked so hard to save? Where is it?" I demanded, tears streaming down my face. He stood before me, his face twisted with a mix of guilt and defiance. "I did what I had to do, Agnes. We needed a fresh start. A chance to live the life we deserve," he replied, his voice laced with a twisted justification. "You stole from me, from us. How could you betray our vows, our love?" I cried out, my voice breaking with each word. Tom's eyes hardened, his resolve strengthening. "Love isn't enough, Agnes. I needed to secure our future. And this was the only way," he said, his words slicing through my heart like a knife. I stumbled backward, my mind reeling from the magnitude of his betrayal. I had married a stranger, a man whose greed had overshadowed any semblance of love or honor. The life we had built together had crumbled before my very eyes. In the days that followed, I discovered the extent of their deceit. Tom and his parents had meticulously planned this grand theft, using our savings to purchase a lavish home where they intended to live a life of luxury at my expense. As anger surged through my veins, I knew I had to take action. The betrayal had severed any remaining ties of love and trust between us. I made the agonizing decision to file for divorce, vowing to reclaim what was rightfully mine and expose their vile scheme to the world. With the help of a skilled attorney, I embarked on a legal battle that would test my resilience and determination. The courtroom became a battlefield, each session an opportunity to reveal the truth and seek justice. In the face of mounting evidence and testimonies, Tom's arrogance wavered, his lies crumbling like a house of cards. The court, appalled by his actions, saw through his charade and ruled in my favor. I had won the battle, but the war was far from over. Though wounded and scarred, I emerged from the courtroom with a renewed sense of purpose. The fight for justice had only just begun, but I was ready to face the challenges that lay ahead. Little did Tom and his parents know that the tables were about to turn, and they would come face to face with the consequences of their despicable actions. Broken-hearted and furious, I knew I had to take matters into my own hands. Betrayed by the man I had loved and trusted, I made the difficult decision to file for divorce. The legal battle that ensued was arduous, but I was determined to fight for what was rightfully mine. With the support of a skilled attorney and the unwavering encouragement from my friends, I entered the courtroom, prepared to unveil the true extent of Tom's deceit. The air crackled with tension as the proceedings began, the weight of truth hanging heavy in the room. As I took the stand, my voice steady but filled with righteous anger, I recounted the events that had unfolded. The stolen money, the luxurious house purchased with our savings, and the web of lies Tom had spun to justify his actions. The courtroom listened intently, the jury captivated by the tale of betrayal, but it was the judge's stern gaze that fueled my determination. I would not rest until justice was served. Tom's defense lawyer attempted to discredit my claims, painting me as a naive and gullible wife who had fallen prey to her husband's machinations. But I stood firm, armed with evidence and the unwavering conviction that truth would prevail. In the midst of the legal proceedings, a pivotal moment arrived when the judge called for Tom to take the stand. The room held its breath as he hesitantly approached, his facade of confidence crumbling under the weight of my accusations. "Mr. Thomas, do you deny stealing the money from the safe, which rightfully belonged to your wife?" The judge's voice boomed with authority. Tom's eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape. But there was none. Defeated, he lowered his gaze and muttered, "No, Your Honor! I confess to taking the money." A collective gasp echoed through the courtroom as the truth hung heavy in the air. Tom's admission was a damning blow to his case, a confirmation of his guilt that reverberated through the room. With each passing witness and piece of evidence, Tom's defense crumbled further, revealing the extent of his greed and deception. The court, appalled by his actions, saw through his feeble attempts to save face. In a pivotal moment, my attorney presented the evidence that would turn the tide in my favor, an incriminating paper trail that exposed Tom's intricate plan to steal the money and purchase the luxury home. The judge, his eyes filled with both disappointment and resolve, pronounced his ruling. Based on the evidence presented and Mr. Thomas's admission of guilt, I find in favor of the plaintiff, Agnes. Not only is she entitled to her rightful share of the assets, but she shall also be awarded the luxury home acquired with the stolen funds. A mix of relief and vindication washed over me as the judge's words settled in. I had secured a victory, a triumph over the darkness that had clouded my life. The courtroom erupted in murmurs, and I caught a glimpse of Tom's face, etched with a mix of rage and defeat. With the stroke of a gavel, the chapter of deceit came to an end, and a new chapter of justice began. I had emerged from the legal battle stronger and more resolute than ever. The tables had turned, and Tom would face the consequences of his actions. As I left the courtroom, a sense of triumph swelled within me. The road to healing and rebuilding lay before me, and I was determined to seize it with every ounce of strength I possessed. As the dust settled and the divorce was finalized, I stood before the grand doors of the luxury home that had once symbolized Tom's betrayal. The house, once a monument to his greed and deception, was now mine, a symbol of my resilience and newfound strength. With the support of my friends who had been unwavering pillars of strength throughout the ordeal, I began the slow process of rebuilding my life. The wounds inflicted by Tom's betrayal would never fully heal, but I refused to let his actions define me. Instead, I used the pain as fuel to propel me forward. With the legal battles behind me, I turned my attention to transforming the house into a sanctuary, a place where I could heal, regroup, and forge a new path for myself. The walls echoed with the sounds of renovation as I breathed new life into every corner, erasing the memories of deceit that had tainted the space. One sunny afternoon, amidst the renovations, my friend Lisa joined me in the newly renovated living room. She gazed around, her eyes filled with admiration. "Agnes, it's incredible what you've done with this place. You've truly turned it into a home," she remarked, her voice filled with warmth. I smiled, a sense of satisfaction filling my heart. "Thank you, Lisa. It's been a labor of love, a symbol of reclaiming my life and my independence. This house will no longer be a reminder of betrayal. It'll be a testament to my strength and resilience." Over time, the house transformed from a mere dwelling into a haven of solace and empowerment. Each room represented a step forward, a corner of my world reclaimed. The once oppressive atmosphere had been replaced by an air of liberation and possibility. As I settled into my new life, I immersed myself in activities that brought me joy and fulfillment. I reconnected with my passion for painting, spending hours in my art studio, allowing the brushstrokes to tell stories of resilience and rebirth. One evening, as I stood in front of a canvas, adding the final touches to a vibrant painting, my friend Sarah entered the room. She observed the piece, her eyes twinkling with admiration. "Agnes, your art has taken on a new depth and strength. It's as if your journey has infused every stroke with power and beauty," she remarked, her voice filled with awe. I nodded, my heart swelling with pride. "Sarah, you're right. Each painting represents a part of me, a visual expression of my journey through pain and transformation. Through art, I've found a way to heal and share my story with others. With time, I began to rebuild not only my physical surroundings, but also the foundations of my emotional well-being. Therapy became an integral part of my healing process, providing a safe space to process the trauma and nurture my spirit. During one of my therapy sessions, my counselor looked at me with genuine warmth. "Agnes, I've watched you evolve and emerge from the depths of betrayal with remarkable resilience. Your ability to rebuild your life amidst the pain is truly inspiring. Remember, you hold the power to shape your future, and it's bright." Her words resonated deeply within me, igniting a newfound sense of self-belief and hope. I had endured the darkest of days, but I had also discovered the strength within me to rise above adversity. Today, I stand in the grand foyer of the house that was once a symbol of my suffering. It has been transformed into a sanctuary, a place where I can find solace and embrace my newfound freedom. Through the pain and the triumphs, I have learned that I am capable of rewriting my story. As I step into the next chapter of my life, I am filled with gratitude for the friends who stood by my side, the strength I discovered within myself, and the knowledge that I am deserving of love, trust, and happiness. The journey continues, and I embrace it with an open heart, ready to seize the possibilities that lie ahead.